The private washroom on the 42nd floor of Miller Tech was supposed to be deserted at 3:47 in the afternoon. Emily Park, a quiet young woman who had mastered the art of blending into the background, pushed her cleaning cart past the polished mahogany doors. She froze when she caught the sound of a child's muffled sobs. Words tumbled out, words in Mandarin. Words that did not belong in this cold, corporate tower of glass and power. For 8 months, Emily had lived like a shadow in Miller Tech. 26 years old, wearing her gray uniform, collecting trash bins filled with million-dollar contracts she would never touch. Executives walked past her without notice, but her grandmother's lessons stayed in her ears. The softest voices sometimes carry the truest message. Once Emily had dreamed of teaching. Rutgers University had been her chance, but a professor had dismissed her unconventional background, crushing 3 years of effort and sending her spiraling back into old insecurities. Raised by a Chinese grandmother in America, she had always felt caught between worlds. Cleaning offices became her survival, her invisibility, her shield. But invisibility had its uses. She noticed things. How CEO Daniel Miller's jaw tightened at the mention of his late wife. How his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, waited alone in the lobby after school, too often unseen by a father drowning in grief and work. Emily recognized the silence Sophie carried. She had once carried the same. Now, hearing the crying behind the bathroom door, her heart ached. Not because she fully understood the Mandarin words, but because she understood the loneliness in them. Her grandmother had taught her, if someone weeps in any language, you try to help. Setting her supplies aside, Emily tapped gently on the door. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" The crying stilled. Then came the faint reply, in Mandarin. "No one understands me." Emily's breath hitched. Her grandmother's voice returned in memory. "Language is a bridge, Emily. Sometimes you're the only one who can cross it." In careful Mandarin, Emily whispered through the door, "May I come in?" The lock clicked. The door creaked open. And there stood Sophie Miller, Daniel Miller's untouchable daughter, with red-rimmed eyes and cheeks streaked with tears. You speak like my mama did." Before Emily could answer, heavy footsteps echoed. Daniel Miller's voice cut through the hallway like steel. "Sophie, why is this taking so long?" He turned the corner and stopped cold. His sharp blue gaze shifted between his daughter and the janitor kneeling beside her. The most powerful man in the company had just discovered his child's secret grief in the hands of someone he'd never noticed. His voice was controlled, but icy. "What's going on here?" Emily rose slowly, palms visible. "Your daughter was upset. I only wanted to help." "And you speak Mandarin?" His tone sharpened. "Yes," she answered. "My grandmother raised me after my parents died. In a car accident. She was from Shanghai. Mandarin was my first language." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "How convenient. How long have you been working here?" "Almost 9 months. Plenty of time to research my family then." Before Emily could respond, Sophie clutched her arm. "Baba, she's not like the others. She didn't ask about money. She just wanted to help." The child's choice of Baba, father in Mandarin, did not go unnoticed. Emily stood straighter, meeting Daniel's suspicious stare. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Miller. My grandmother taught me one thing. When someone is crying in any language, you don't walk away." Something flickered in his eyes. Then, not softness, but recognition. The next morning, Emily found a new badge clipped to her cart. It granted her access to the executive floor. Alongside it lay a note written in Daniel's sharp, deliberate handwriting. "Sophie has requested Mandarin tutoring 1 hour after your shift." My office. Emily's pulse quickened. She knew this was risky. In her experience, men with power didn't hand out opportunities. They set traps. But Sophie's tear-stained face lingered in her memory. That evening, Daniel's office felt like a courtroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. Sophie sat waiting in a leather chair, dwarfed by its size. Daniel remained standing, arms crossed, watching Emily like a hawk. "Sophie tells me her Mandarin is slipping," he said at last. His voice cracked, almost imperceptibly. "Her mother made sure she learned when we lived in Beijing. After Sarah died, I couldn't—" He trailed off. Emily simply nodded, then turned to Sophie. "Shall we start?" Within minutes, the little girl transformed. The quiet child from the bathroom lit up, laughing as she practiced tones and remembered her mother's words. Daniel stayed silent, but couldn't look away. When Sophie stumbled on a character, Emily gently guided her hand across the page. Their voices, one adult, one child, blended into a melody Daniel hadn't heard in years. A melody that belonged to Sarah. Death. Sophie whispered to Emily in Mandarin, thinking her father couldn't understand. "She's just like Mama." Emily glanced up to find Daniel staring at them, something raw and unguarded in his expression. For just a moment, the CEO mask slipped, revealing a father drowning in his own limitations. As Emily packed up to leave, Sophie hugged her tightly. "Will you come back tomorrow, if your father agrees?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings, same time." It wasn't warmth, but it was permission. Over the following weeks, Emily became Sophie's bridge back to her mother's memory. They read Chinese poetry, practiced calligraphy, and talked about Beijing winters and summer festivals. Daniel began staying late on those evenings, claiming to work, but actually listening to his daughter's laughter echo through the office. Emily learned that Sophie and Sarah had lived in Beijing for 2 years, while Sarah managed Miller's Asian expansion. Sophie had attended a bilingual school, made friends who spoke Mandarin as naturally as breathing, and developed what her mother called a heart that thinks in 2 languages. When Sarah was diagnosed with cancer, they'd returned to New Jersey for treatment. Sophie had lost not just her mother, but an entire world of linguistic and cultural connection. "In Beijing, I wasn't weird for knowing 2 languages," Sophie confided during one session. "Mama said I was lucky because I could love people in English and dream in Chinese." Daniel, who had been pretending to review contracts, looked up sharply. He'd never heard Sophie articulate her bilingual identity so clearly. Emily recognized the ache in Sophie's voice. The same loss she'd felt when her grandmother passed away 3 years ago, taking with her the last person who truly shared Emily's cultural bridge. "Your mama was right," Emily said gently. Languages aren't just words. They're different ways your heart can feel at home. One Thursday night, Emily arrived to find Sophie curled in the corner of the office, her homework untouched, speaking rapid Mandarin to a stuffed panda, a gift from her mother. "What's wrong?" Emily asked in Mandarin. "The kids at school, they say speaking Chinese makes me weird. They say my mama shouldn't have taken me so far away." Sophie's voice cracked, switching back to English. Maybe if we'd stayed here, she wouldn't have gotten sick. Emily knelt beside her, her heart breaking for this child carrying such impossible guilt. Her words carried a motivational power born from experience. "Your mama took you to Beijing because she loved you. She wanted you to see the world through her eyes, to carry her stories in your heart. But now the stories feel too heavy." Daniel's shadow fell across them. Emily looked up to find him in the doorway, his face stricken. He'd heard everything, the pain his daughter had been hiding, the weight she'd been carrying alone. "Sophie?" he said quietly, moving toward them. "Come here." As Sophie ran into her father's arms, Emily began to gather her things, sensing this was a moment for family only. "Stay," Daniel said without looking at her. "Please, how can a father learn to heal wounds he never knew existed?" The following Tuesday, Emily arrived at Miller to find chaos erupting on the executive floor. Chloe Richardson, Daniel's razor-sharp assistant, who'd worked her way up from receptionist over 8 years, intercepted her at the elevator with eyes like winter steel. Chloe had watched Emily's growing influence with mounting resentment. As Daniel's gatekeeper, she controlled access to his time, his attention, his trust. For years, she'd positioned herself as indispensable, the one person who understood his needs, managed his schedule, protected his interests. Emily's presence threatened that carefully constructed dynamic. "There's been a development," Chloe said, her voice dripping false concern. "Some troubling information has come to light about your motivations." Emily's stomach dropped. "What kind of information?" "Several employees have reported seeing you asking unusual questions about Mr. Miller's personal life, about his wife's death, about his daughter's vulnerabilities." Shock lie, Chloe's smile was surgical. "We also found that you researched the company extensively before applying, including Mr. Miller's family background." The accusation was partially true. Emily had researched Miller Tech thoroughly, as any job seeker would. She'd read about Sarah Miller's death in a Forbes article about Daniel's philanthropic work in her memory. But Chloe twisted these normal preparations into something sinister. "I researched the company like any job applicant would. And how convenient that you speak the exact language his dead wife spoke. Some might call that calculated." Chloe's voice carried the authority of someone who'd made herself Daniel's primary advisor. "You do realize that Mr. Miller is worth over $200 million. That makes Sophie quite a valuable connection." Emily felt the familiar weight of being judged of having her authenticity questioned. That's not what happened. Emily felt the walls closing in, remembering every scholarship committee, every professor, every employer who'd found reasons to doubt her. "That's not what happened. Mr. Miller is concerned about Sophie's emotional attachment to you. He's wondering if this whole thing was orchestrated, a lonely cleaning lady targeting a grieving widower hour through his vulnerable child." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Emily thought of her grandmother's warnings about people who would always see her as less than who would twist her kindness into manipulation. "Where is Mr. Miller?" "I need to speak with him. He's in emergency meetings all day, but he asked me to give you this." Chloe handed her an envelope with her name written in Daniel's handwriting inside a single sentence. "I think it's best if we take a break from the tutoring sessions until I can sort this out. End." Emily stared at the note, recognizing the careful distance of a man protecting himself from disappointment. She'd seen it before in her father's eyes when he decided she was too much trouble, in her professors' faces when they decided she didn't fit their expectations. "I understand," Emily said quietly, folding the note. "I'll finish my shift and turn in my access badge." As she walked away, Chloe's satisfied smile burned into her memory. That evening, Emily sat in her small apartment staring at the Mandarin poetry, books she'd planned to share with Sophie. Her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. "Emily?" Sophie's voice was thick with tears. "Daddy won't let me call you." But I snuck his phone. "They're saying terrible things about you at school. Kids heard their parents talking. They're saying you're a liar, Sophie. I told Daddy it wasn't true. I told him you never asked about money or anything bad. But he's scared. He's always scared when he cares about someone." Emily's heart shattered. "Listen, to me, Xia Gongju, sometimes adults get confused and scared and they make mistakes. But that doesn't change what we shared." "Okay. Your mama's stories, your language, that's yours forever. Will I see you again?" Emily closed her eyes, feeling the familiar ache of being dismissed, of having her worth questioned. "I don't know, sweetheart." 3 days later, Emily was at her kitchen table circling job listings in the newspaper when her phone rang. Daniel's number. "Emily." His voice was tight with stress. "I need you to come in now. Mr. Miller, I don't think our interpreter for the Shanghai Deal just had a car accident. We have 12 executives from Chen Industries flying in from Beijing in 2 hours. They don't speak English well, and this merger is worth $400 million. His voice cracked slightly. This deal has been in negotiation for 18 months. Chen Industries is our gateway to the entire Asian market. If we lose this, we lose our chance to compete globally. Emily understood the weight of what he was saying. MillerTech specialized in healthcare technology devices that could save lives in emerging markets. The Shanghai partnership would allow them to manufacture and distribute their products across Asia, potentially helping millions of patients who couldn't currently access their technology. What about other interpreters' professional services? Everyone's booked or unavailable. The accident happened 30 minutes ago. Our interpreter is in surgery. The translation agency says their next available Mandarin specialist is in California and can't fly in until tomorrow. Daniel's desperation was evident, Sophie suggested. She said you could do it, that you speak like someone who lived in Beijing. The irony was bitter. After questioning her motives after suggesting she was manipulative, he was asking her to save his company. But Emily also heard something else in his voice. Genuine regret and the kind of vulnerability that comes when pride crashes against necessity. I don't have business experience, Mr. Miller. I'm not certified for medical technology translation. I know. I'm asking anyway. I'm asking because my daughter believes in you, and maybe I should have trusted her judgment from the beginning. Emily stared out her window at the gray afternoon sky, thinking of her grandmother's voice. Sometimes, my dear one, people need to see your light before they can trust it. I'll be there in an hour. When Emily walked into the MillerTech lobby, she drew stares. Not because she looked different. She was still the quiet janitor in her simple clothes, but because she was walking toward the executive elevator instead of the service corridors. Sophie was waiting by the reception desk, her face lighting up when she saw Emily. I knew you'd come. Is your father ready for this? He's scared, Sophie said with 8-year-old honesty, but not of you anymore. He's scared he was wrong. The conference. Room fell silent when Emily entered. 12 stern-faced executives in expensive suits turned to assess this unexpected interpreter, a young woman in a modest dress who looked nothing like the polished professionals they were used to. Despite being a shy girl thrust into this intimidating environment, Emily maintained her composure. Daniel stood at the head of the table, his face unreadable. Gentlemen, this is Emily Park. She'll be facilitating our discussion today. Mr. Chen, the lead executive, studied Emily skeptically, asking in Mandarin, Have you lived in Beijing? Emily met his gaze steadily, responding in fluent Mandarin. No, but my heart has always been there. My grandmother taught me that language isn't just words, it carries the soul. Something shifted in Mr. Chen's expression. He nodded slowly, then began speaking in rapid, complex Mandarin about technical specifications and market projections. For the next 3 hours, Emily became the bridge between two worlds. She didn't just translate words. She conveyed intentions, cultural nuances, and the subtle emotional undertones that could make or break billion-dollar relationships. When Mr. Chen made a joke about American coffee, Emily translated not just the words, but the warmth behind them, making Daniel laugh for the first time in weeks. When technical disagreements arose, she found ways to frame objections as collaborative problem-solving rather than confrontational challenges. As the contracts were signed, Mr. Chen approached, Emily privately speaking in Mandarin. Your Chinese is better than many foreigners I've met. Where did you learn? Emily replied in Mandarin from my grandmother. She said, Language is a gift of love. The heartwarming exchange reminded her why she'd always treasured her cultural heritage. Mr. Chen smiled, then turned to Daniel. You are very fortunate to have such talent in your company. She understands not just our words, but our hearts. After the executives left, the conference room emptied except for Emily and Daniel. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. I owe you an apology, Daniel said finally. Several apologies, actually. Will Daniel's recognition of Emily's worth be enough to heal the damage done by doubt and prejudice? Daniel. Miller had built his empire on calculated risks and careful assessments. But standing in the empty conference room watching Emily gather her notes with quiet dignity, he realized he'd made the worst miscalculation of his professional life. The Shanghai deal, he said, his voice with exhaustion and regret. $400 million, and you saved it. Emily looked up from her papers, her expression guarded. I did what was needed. Your company will benefit. My company. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, feeling every one of his 41 years, Emily. What I said before, what I implied about your motives, you protected your daughter. I understand that. Do you? His voice cracked slightly. Because I'm not sure I understand anything anymore. Emily sat down her papers, studying his face. For the first time since she'd known him, Daniel Miller looked uncertain, vulnerable, more like the grieving father than the untouchable CEO. After Sarah died, Daniel continued staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the darkening sky. I built walls around myself, around Sophie. I told myself it was protection, but really I was just terrified of losing anyone else I cared about. Your presence became an inspirational reminder that connection is still possible. Caring doesn't make you weak, Mr. Miller. When Chloe brought me those accusations, I wanted to believe them. Not because I thought they were true, but because believing them would be easier than risking. He turned to face her, then risking trusting someone new. Emily's expression softened. What changed your mind, Sophie? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She cornered me in my office yesterday, speaking entirely in Mandarin, fast, furious, passionate, exactly like her mother used to when she was making a point. I couldn't understand half of it, but I understood the emotion. What did she say? She said you were the first person since her mother died who saw her completely. Not just the sad parts or the smart parts, but all of her. She said you never tried to fix her or change her. You just witnessed her. Emily felt tears prick her eyes, thinking of the small girl who trusted her with her mother's language, her deepest fears, her most precious memories. Then she asked me a question that kept me awake all night. Daniel continued. She asked if I was more afraid of you hurting us or of us not being good enough for you to stay. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Chloe resigned this morning, Daniel said quietly. Effective immediately. It seems she was concerned about her position when she saw how much Sophie had grown to rely on you. Emily nodded, unsurprised. She'd seen that particular fear before. The terror of being replaced by someone unexpected, someone who didn't fit the expected mold. Kookie, I'd like to offer you a position, Daniel said. Director of International Relations. You'd work directly with our overseas partners, handle cultural consulting, language services. The salary would be substantial. Emily was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what he was offering. Director level meant a corner office, a 6F-figure salary respect from colleagues who'd barely acknowledged her existence. It also meant proving herself every day to people who would question whether she deserved her rapid promotion. The board approved this, she asked, knowing corporate hierarchies don't usually smile on janitors becoming executives overnight. The board saw the Shanghai contracts, Daniel said simply. They also saw Mr. Chen's recommendation letter. He specifically requested that any future negotiations include the young woman who understood not just our language, but our cultural values. That kind of endorsement from Chen Industries carries significant weight. Emily thought about the months of empty applications, rejection letters, and interviews where she'd been told she was almost right for positions. And Sophie, she asked, would still get her tutoring if she wants it, but as family friends, not as whatever this strange arrangement was. Daniel's voice softened. Emily, I need you to know something. The promotion isn't charity or guilt. In 3 hours, you demonstrated more cultural intelligence and business acumen than some executives I've worked with for years. You didn't just translate words. You bridged entirely different ways of thinking. Family, friends, Emily tested the words, finding them both terrifying and wonderful. I know it's a lot to consider. You don't have to decide right now. Yes. Daniel blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll take the position. Yes to helping with Sophie. Yes to Emily took a breath, gathering courage she'd forgotten she possessed. Yes to trusting that sometimes good things happen to people like me. Something shifted in Daniel's face, relief, gratitude, and something that looked remarkably like hope. People like you? He repeated softly. You mean people who are brilliant, kind, and brave enough to help strangers' children in bathroom stalls? Emily laughed, surprising herself. I was thinking more like people who get overlooked, people who aren't supposed to matter. Emily. Daniel's voice was serious now, executive confident. In 8 months, you've transformed my daughter's relationship with her mother's memory, saved my company's biggest deal, and taught me that I've been looking at the world through a very narrow lens. He paused. You were never overlooked. We were just looking in the wrong direction. A soft knock interrupted them. Sophie peeked around the conference room door, her face anxious. Is it okay? Are you friends again? Daniel opened his arms and Sophie ran to him. But she reached for Emily's hand too, creating a small circle of connection in the vast corporate space. We're more than friends, Daniel said, looking at Emily over his daughter's head. We're family. But can this new family truly heal from the wounds of loss and learn to trust in tomorrow's possibilities? 1 year later, Emily Park stood before a classroom full of Millerachek employees' children, her voice steady and warm, as she guided them through their first Mandarin lesson. The company's new language and culture program had become so popular they'd had to move to the larger conference room to accommodate everyone. Language isn't just about words, Emily explained, watching 8-year-old faces light up with curiosity. It's about connection, about understanding that there are many ways to say, I care about you. Her motivational approach to teaching had transformed how children viewed cultural differences. Sophie, now 9 and glowing with confidence, raised her hand, like how you say be careful in Chinese when you want someone to be safe. But you're really saying my heart is small when I worry about you? Emily smiled, remembering the day Sophie had first shared that insight, a gift from her mother's memory now passed on to new friends. In the back of the room, Daniel leaned against the wall. No longer the isolated CEO who'd once viewed emotions as weaknesses, he'd learned to read the subtle language of his daughter's moods, to recognize when she needed space and when she needed closeness. More importantly, he'd learned that strength sometimes looked like admitting you needed help. After class, as the children scattered to find their parents, Sophie approached Emily with a carefully folded paper. I wrote something, she said suddenly, shy. For the memorial garden we're making for Mama. Emily unfolded the paper, her heart swelling as she read the beautifully written characters. Sophie had written in Chinese, Mama's love lives in my heart, and also in Aunt Emily's words. Even this shy girl had found her voice through language and love. Sophie, Emily whispered, kneeling to the girl's level. This is beautiful. Perfect. Will you help me read it at the ceremony in both languages? Emily looked up to find Daniel watching them, his eyes bright with unshed tears. He nodded encouragingly. I would be honored, Emily said. The memorial ceremony was small but meaningful, just family and close. Friends gathered in the rooftop garden Daniel had built in Sarah's honor. Surrounded by flowers and soft light, Emily and Sophie stood before the memorial plaque engraved in both English and Mandarin. As Emily traced the words, she felt the weight of everything that had changed over the past year, grief giving way to growth, endings turning into beginnings. She thought of her grandmother, gone for 3 years now, yet still present in every moment of connection, every bridge of understanding created through language. And she remembered the version of herself who once hid behind a cleaning cart, doubting her own worth. "Thank you," Daniel said softly, as guests murmured and mingled around them. "For noticing Sophie when I couldn't, for putting family before deals, for showing us that family isn't only about blood, it's about presence." Emily glanced at Sophie, laughing with her school friends in a mix of English and Mandarin, completely at ease in her blended identity. "She saved herself," Emily said quietly. "I just gave her words." Daniel turned to her, his expression open and raw. "I was wrong, Emily. Wrong about what matters. Wrong about what my daughter needed. Wrong about love itself. I thought loving meant shielding someone from hurt. But Sarah would have reminded me, real love is trusting someone to face life's risks, to grow through truth and connection." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she listened, realizing how far they had all come. "You didn't just help Sophie keep her bond with her mother," Daniel continued. "You helped me discover who I want to be, as a father and as a man." At that moment, Sophie tugged Emily's sleeve. "Aunt Emily, come try the calligraphy. I'm teaching everyone to write their names." As Emily followed her, Daniel whispered, "Thank you for showing us that the most powerful gifts often arrive quietly." The afternoon sun spilled across the garden, casting a golden glow on the plaque where Sarah's favorite Chinese saying was etched. "A single act of kindness throws roots in all directions, and those roots create new trees." Children bent over brushes and ink, Sophie glowing with pride, Daniel helping an elderly colleague form careful strokes. The air was full of laughter and belonging. Emily's heart swelled with the truth her grandmother had always known. Language is a bridge, but she also understood something deeper now. Sometimes we don't just walk across bridges. Sometimes we become them. And she wondered, what small act of kindness might change someone's world today if only we dare to see it?